Anything you want to say to Steve, Sonji?
I do. I want to just say congratulations and on your book, and I hope it's a number one seller. I will be looking for it and purchasing a copy myself.
Well, you can get it on Amazon, bro.
And it is a number one seller.
And it is a number one seller. You get it on Amazon.
Good.
What about Barnes and Noble?
Not yet.
Okay. All right, man. Appreciate
And
you.
he talked about his golf game. I ain't seen it yet. he talked about his golf game. I don't know.
That's gonna be a different. I'm gonna have here for one of those Fridays free fall, and we get on each other's sports acumen.
So that's another thing we have in common. We both play golf, and we play golf together.
I hate y'all.
All right.
All right, man. Appreciate you, man. Thank you. And you know what? And just so it ain't that you say you're perfect. I think you're working towards that. We were talking about something off air, and I was telling you that for our relationship, our operative scripture is 1 Corinthians 13 chapter, which talks about what love is. And one of those things that it says is that love does not keep score. Talk a little bit about it, because you say you talk about that in your book.
Well, when you keep score, somehow you can always put yourself on the losing side. You always feel like you gave in more, you feel like you gave more, and you kind of shortchange yourself, and you put yourself in a victim position. In a victim position, it keeps you frustrated, it keeps you angry. There's a continual level of disappointment. And not keeping score is, I did this for you, you did that for me, I did this, you didn't do that. When you just learn to love that person and give that person your all. Now, granted, we want that person to give their all to us, but only what you can control. You can control what you do. There's an equation, the letter E, the letter R equals O, which the event, you sometimes can control or can't control the event. But what you can always control is your response. And that response will give you a more favorable outcome. It may not always come out in the way you wanted it, but when you control your response, you're able to have a more predictable outcome.
So to be angry but to sin not really talks about whether it's a difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is just what that is. You're not even thinking. When you respond, at least you've had a little time to think about what it is that you're going to say and the consequences of what it is that you're going to say.
And sometimes our reactions are so programmed from the basic foundation of who we are that we don't even think about it, but we do still have a choice if we stop and breathe and think about our reaction and the outcome we want.
What about something that is difficult for most human beings and really difficult in a relationship, this idea of forgiveness?
Oh, wow. We love that subject because our definition of bliss, let me give you that and we'll get right into the forgiveness. Our definition for bliss is the ability to love and be loved and have abundance in complete forgiveness and without judgment. When you understand forgiveness is not for the other person. A lot of times we feel if I forgive, I'm letting the person get away with something. But when we forgive, we actually let ourselves off the hook. We don't have to carry that hurt. We don't have to carry that anger. We don't have to hold on to resentment. I love what Nelson Mandela said. Bitterness is the poison we swallow, hoping it will kill our enemy. And so unforgiveness does that to you. You're not really hurting that other person. You're ultimately hurting yourself.
And blocking your blessings. Because when you forgive, you're opening up your heart, you're opening up your mind, you're opening up what you think, and it allows blessings to come to you.
And I don't, I try to always in this public space, just being respectful, but in terms of things, but this is just as a reference point. This idea of when we talk about forgiveness, one of the steps off is that love covers a multitude of sins, right? that the fact that when we really care about somebody, really love somebody, first of all, we're not as judgmental when it comes to their feelings. And then the other piece of it becomes that our first reaction then is to cover them. You know, you don't want them exposed. And I always say, to me, the Christmas story is really about Joseph and Joseph's willingness to cover what would have been a public shaming, you know, by marrying her, and then by stepping in and being the father, you know, that he didn't have to be, because he could have just put her away, you know, but he didn't. So it says a lot about his love for her, and that how you will cover folks. I tell my wife, I said, look, there's some really embarrassing, you know, the public humiliation. I really don't expect you at the press conference. You know, I don't want, it's tough enough, right? And some people don't mind, you know, she'll be the prop. I'll put her out there, but you're really exposing her to even more, because then people can be very harsh in their judgments, right?
And one of the ways that we've learned, you know that you have true forgiveness when you do not wish the situation to have been any different than it was, because you've learned from that situation. It may have been the worst thing in your life. I talk about in the book being molested, and I could resent that person forever, but because I understand now more about myself and what I went through, I don't wish that to be any different. It made me stronger, and it made me the person who I am today, and I'm thankful for that.
And then the ability even to be, because in a lot of those instances you blame yourself and be able to forgive yourself, and talk about the things that, here's the unfortunate thing about relationships. It's with another human being. Really, we're human beings bringing our good and our bad, and I think that sometimes we forget that. I told a story, I said, man, when I found out that my wife was selfish, do you know I had the nerve to be offended? No, really, I had the nerve to be, I can't believe, as selfish as I was, right? And I'm just like, no, I mean, she's being human. I'm being human. And sometimes I think, now, that doesn't become, it shouldn't be used as an excuse. But certainly, it's our reality. You know, that this, and then the other thing, I heard this, and I always, I guess if you can respond to this idea of expecting perfection.
Wow.
Let me respond to that one.
Yeah, I saw you just lit up on that one.
In our relationship, one might describe me as the perfectionist. One just might.
Don't know where they got it
I
from.
don't know where they got it from. But understanding that he has his strength and his creativity, his being able to adjust to any situation that comes. I mean, his background and all the things that have happened to him, he was able to adapt. For me, it was about being methodical, planning it out, having a goal, working towards it. My linear thinking with his creativity is what makes us a powerful couple. So I try to be a little bit more like him, or at least allow him his freedom for creativity. And I'm learning to deal with my perfectionism. I recently went to a retreat with a group of women, and Lisa Nichols, she's one of the speakers from The Secret. And I learned that when we have something on the surface that's causing us to be perfect or wanting to be perfect, there's always an underlying root cause. And mine came from wanting to get my mother's approval. And even after I got what I thought was her approval, I wanted to keep it up because I didn't want to slip back. Once I recognized that thought was going on in the back of my head, I could let go a little bit more of my perfectionism and start working on other areas of my life.
And you know, it's interesting because even the work that we did with youth, we learned that it was easier for youth to come and talk to us, you know, as opposed to them going to talk to their parents, because they never wanted to disappoint their parents. I don't think people kind of understand that. Oh, they can talk to me about everything. No, I don't think they can. Because when they look and even though you don't say anything, they can see the disappointment in your face, right? Because you're human, you know. And that wanting them to be perfect, you know. And part of it is and really learn this with our God kids now that they're becoming adults, is that your first reaction is just want to shield them from all those things in life. But the reality is you can't. And that you pray for grace, and you pray that what has been planted in them will be the seeds of those things to help them get through what they need to get through. But, you worry about things. I mean, again, and we're not biological parents, but when you look at our God kids, it's things that you sit up and you go like, wow, it is. So I think that not looking for perfection in the other person. Let me ask this. Are you still discovering things about each other?
Every day. I like the way you said, allow room for the humanity of the other person. And a lot of time, like you mentioned, in keeping score, we like to blame people. We like to blame somebody else.
It's her fault. She's the reason why. See what you made me do?
And when you get in touch with your humanity and allow others to get in touch with their humanity, there's a story I share in the book about my father. And I used to tell the story. He was only there for 2 years while I was growing up. Once when I was 8, once when I was 15. But I've learned that you don't have to change the events, but you can change the way you look at the events. I changed the events. Let me tell you what happened. I was 8 years old, living in Suffolk, Virginia in 1969. My mother had a nervous breakdown, and she could no longer care for my sister and I. So she called my dad, that was recently married in California, in the Air Force, and said, hey, come get these kids. So rather than saying he was only there for 2 years, he was there when I needed him. So you stand on your story, not in your story, where you're not the victim of your story. And you allow for your mom's humanity and her frailness. She suffered from severe mental illness and had a nervous breakdown. She was schizoaffective, they call it. Schizoaffective is schizophrenic and bipolar at the same time, which was a heck of a combination, which you can read all about that story in my second book called Birds on the Wire. But my dad showed up when I needed him. And then there was another, and we only lived with him for about a year. Then we were back with my mom. And there was another time when I was 15 years old, my mom and we got into a big blowout, and she threw me out at 15 years old. But my dad was there to take me in. So I tell the story that he was there when I needed him, rather than he was only there. Understanding his humanity, understanding her humanity.
And you asked about, are we always discovering things? In helping him to write his autobiography, I have learned a lot about this man. Stuff that we didn't talk about because it was just so buried down deep. He would talk about his mom having a breakdown and just move on past it. I'm like, well, what was that like? What was it like moving? He moved 10 times before he was 18. And was it 4 high schools that you went through?
3 high schools, 5 different states.
So just asking those questions in our communication of what did that feel like? I said, it must have been awful. He's like, no, it was great. I was a new kid every time I went someplace.
But new kids has its benefits.